Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. When the hush of midnight settled over the lake house, I felt the click of a lock in my chest long before I heard the hallway door begin to stir. We had come here as four friends chasing a last breath of summer, but shadows lengthened differently after dusk, and the orange glow of the fireplace began tracing boughs in reverse. His best friend's palm hovered at my knee, hesitant, reverent, while my husband lingered somewhere beyond the cedar walls, unaware of the fault line opening beneath us. A single inhale, and the space between curiosity and confession folded. The air smelled of pine smoke and memories we pretended not to keep. Heat pooled where his gaze landed on the pulse in my throat. I shifted closer, feeling the leather sofa sigh beneath us, and the sweep of his thumb along my wrist became a promise too fragile to speak aloud. Every heartbeat wrote a new rule that none of us dared name. Down the corridor, laughter dimmed, replaced by the faint clink of glass and the murmur of old stories. My husband's voice drifted in like a lullaby, yet each note sharpened the spark warming my skin. I wondered if he sensed the storm turning inside me, whether his silence was trust or invitation. His breath fluttered, and the dim lamplight caught in his eyes, twin embers reflecting everything we were about to ignite. Then came the creak, that whisper of wood bending. My heart slammed at the sound, but my body chose stillness, a prayer of defiance and desire in the same breath. I ran my tongue across the name I swore to honor, tasting the salt of a choice already made, and met the shadow in the doorway with a smile that trembled like a held note. His silhouette froze, the moment cracking open around us, and I let the silence fill with a moan meant to echo down every unfinished hallway of our lives. Time stalled, thick as honey, while embers popped in the grate like applause. I watched his shoulders rise and fall, debating mercy or surrender, saw the question in his eyes spiral outward until it wrapped the three of us in the same impossible gravity. Outside, crickets stitched a lullaby for secrets. Inside, I parted my shaking knees a fraction wider, inviting the answer and holding my breath for the ruin or resurrection that would follow. The silence after my moan felt like a live wire, sizzling between the three of us. My husband's silhouette lingered in the doorway, shoulders squared as if bracing for a storm, yet his eyes, dark, wounded, transfixed, never left my face. Beneath me, his best friend's breath tickled the inside of my knees. The warm swell of it made me clench the sofa's edge, fighting the urge to tug him closer. For a fragile heartbeat, none of us moved, as though any gesture might collapse the delicate architecture of this moment. My husband stepped forward, one measured pace, boots creaking on the hardwood. The firelight revealed the tremor in his jaw. He swallowed words that refused to form. I felt the weight of his trust and the brittleness of it, too, like glass balanced on a fingertip. His friend raised his gaze, meeting mine first, asking, "Are we sure?" Then flicking upward to accept the husband's silent judgment. A pulse leaped in my throat. I answered with a soft brush of my fingers through his hair, a gentle tug that said both yes and forgive me. "Tell me," my husband whispered, voice fraying. He wasn't angry, at least not yet. Curiosity mixed with ache, a yearning to understand what spark had drawn me into this orbit. My reply lodged behind my ribs, so I let the answer travel through touch instead. I shifted, sweater sliding to expose the hollow of my collarbone, the place he used to kiss goodnight. His friend watched the fabric fall, pupils widening like eclipses, but he stayed perfectly still, as though holding his breath would keep the world intact. The fire popped, scattering embers that mirrored the scatter of my resolve. I felt my husband's stare travel down my neck, across the trembling line of my thighs, and land on the hands braced at their edges. He exhaled, a sound equal parts surrender and plea, and reached to rest his palm on the doorframe, steadying himself. In that small gesture, I tasted the raw, impossible hope that we might step through this night together rather than shatter apart. Nobody spoke. Instead, the room filled with the rustle of knit fabric and the hush of controlled breathing. I traced slow circles on the friend's shoulder. My husband's fingers tapped the wood in time with my pulse. Heat stacked upon heat, longing upon guilt, until I felt the moment tilt, precarious, toward either devastation or something unimaginably bright. I met my husband's eyes, parted my lips to finally speak, and the door behind him clicked shut, as if the house itself wished to seal us inside, the choice still hanging, unanswered, in the air. The door's muted click felt like the house taking a breath for us, as though the cedar beams understood the burden our lungs could no longer carry. My husband's fingers slipped from the frame, knuckles white, then loosened, an unspoken surrender to gravity or grace, I couldn't tell. Between us, the space thickened with memories, the vows whispered on a rainy April morning, the summer he confessed his fear of not being enough, the night his best friend drove across 3 states to hold him after his mother died. Every shared history fluttered like moths around a single flame, dangerous, beautiful, impossible to ignore. I felt that history press against my spine when the friend rose from the rug, slow and careful, as if standing might shatter the hush. His shoulder brushed my knee, a whisper of warmth, and my breath snagged. The tiniest contact bloomed through me like spilled ink, staining every corner of restraint. Our eyes met, twin storms held in fragile jars, and for half a heartbeat he leaned forward. I tasted the electricity of what would happen if he bridged the inch between us, how it would rewrite every line we'd drawn in safer hours. But he stopped. A single tremor raced through his frame before he stepped back, palms open at his sides in silent apology. The gesture made my chest ache. It also saved me from crossing the line I ached to erase. My husband noticed the retreat, eyes flicking to me, then to his friend, reading the tension like sheet music. I saw longing in his gaze, but also a grief he hadn't chosen. The weight of that grief pinned me to the sofa more firmly than any hand. Outside, wind rattled the windows, a reminder of storms we could not control. Inside, the fire settled to coals, their glow mirroring the simmer of want beneath our skin. My husband moved first, circling the sofa until he was close enough that his scent, cedar soap, and the lake's clean chill wrapped around me. He lifted my chin with 2 fingertips, unbearably gentle. "Careful," he murmured, voice cracked but tender, as though the word could protect us from ourselves. "I know," I whispered, though the confession tasted like a lie. Beneath my sweater, my heartbeat pressed against knit fabric, begging for release. His thumb brushed my cheek in a slow arc, then fell away, leaving cold in its wake. The distance he put between us felt like both mercy and punishment. Across the room, his friend's breath shuddered, mirroring my own. His hands flexed once, as if remembering the shape of my hips, then they fisted in his pockets, anchoring him to restraint. We hovered there, 3 hearts in synchronized revolt, each of us wanting to move, none of us willing to bear the ruin that might follow. The night listened, waiting for whichever truth would finally break its silence, while desire coiled tighter, fierce and patient, under the guise of caution. We were still within the boundaries of YouTube-safe longing, yet one breath closer to the edge. The minute hand on the wall clock lurched forward, its soft tick loud as thunder in the hush that wrapped us. My husband's fingers still hovered by my cheek, not quite touching, as if the ghost of his earlier caress refused to leave. His best friend watched from the hearth, firelight banding his face in copper and shadow, jaw clenched hard enough to quake. Between them, I felt like the strike point of some invisible current, every nerve lit and waiting. "I can't," my husband's voice cracked, then trailed off, the rest of the sentence lost in the crackle of the logs. He swallowed, eyes shining not with accusation, but with something more tender and dangerous. Need, maybe. Fear. I wanted to cradle both. I leaned forward, letting the sweater slip farther, bearing the curve of my shoulder. A tremor raced through him, his thumb grazed, but did not settle, as if the brush of skin alone might redraw our constellations. The distance between his hand and my pulse was no more than a sigh. I held that breath, tasting pine smoke and regret. Behind him, the friend shifted. The soft scuff of his shoe was a plea. He stepped closer, just one pace, until our triangles shrank to a single, breathless line. Heat bloomed where his presence met my peripheral vision. I felt him like sunlight on closed eyelids, unseen yet searing. My husband exhaled a shaky laugh, the kind people make when they stand too near a cliff's edge. "Tell me why," he murmured, a question meant for both of us, or perhaps himself. I parted my lips, but the answer emerged as a whisper so soft it dissolved, "Because I'm burning." Silence swallowed everything except the roar of our heartbeats. I saw the words strike him, soften him, saw his shoulders sag as though surrender might be mercy, not defeat. His best friend's chest rose, fell slower now, controlled, but the skin at his throat gleamed with a telling sheen. "Then let it burn," the friend said, voice low, reverent. The sentence hovered, shimmering like a match just struck. My husband's eyes fluttered closed, lashes trembling. When they opened, resolve glowed inside them, bright, terrified, unstoppable. His palm finally landed on my collarbone, warm and grounding. My pulse leaped under his touch. At the same instant, the friend's fingers brushed the back of my hand, barely there, lighter than smoke, yet it shot through me like an ember finding dry grass. We hung suspended in that three-point circuit of touch, two fingertips, one whispered vow, and a promise of fire held at bay by sheer will. The room seemed to tilt, ready to spill us into whatever lived beyond this moment, and then the wind slammed a shutter outside, jolting us apart, as though the night itself demanded we decide whether to let desire consume or keep smoldering in silence. Rain lashed the glass so hard it sounded like the lake itself had risen to batter the walls, a primal drum that matched the racing of our hearts. My husband's palm was still warm on my collarbone. The friend's fingertips grazed mine like a live wire. All that tethered us to control was the thin thread of breath we shared. Then the front door crashed open. Wind roared down the hallway, carrying a spray of cold water and the sharp scent of lightning-split air. We jerked apart, startled, but the electric thrum between us refused to die. Footsteps pounded, quick and uncertain, splashing droplets across the floorboards. A figure burst into the living room. Zoe, his best friend's on-again, off-again lover, soaked to the skin. Her raincoat clung to her frame, hair plastered in wild ropes around her face. She halted when she saw us, eyes widening at the tableau, me flushed and breathless on the sofa, my husband inches away, and her partner still kneeling, hand half extended toward mine. The fire hissed as rain swept in behind her, steam curling like spirits from the hearth. For one suspended second, no one moved. Then Zoe's gaze sharpened, not with shock, but with something closer to recognition. She shut the door hard enough to rattle picture frames, tossed her keys onto the console, and peeled off the raincoat with deliberate slowness. Beneath, she wore the same oversized university hoodie we had teased her about earlier, now soaked, clinging, translucent in places. "I took the last ferry," she said, voice low, eyes tracking the subtle tremor in my husband's jaw. "Didn't think I'd walk into the middle of negotiations." Her partner, still kneeling, rose to his feet, guilt and relief battling across his features. "Zoe, it's not," she raised a hand, cutting him off. "Don't shape it into something smaller than it is." Her gaze drifted to me, lingering on the exposed line of my shoulder. Instead of anger, I saw curiosity flicker, then a flicker of daring. "I always wondered," she murmured, barely louder than the rain. My husband stepped back, tension vibrating through him like a coiled spring. "We weren't planning. Planning is overrated," Zoe replied, shrugging off the hoodie. Steam wafted from the wet fabric, and in the firelight her damp skin glowed like polished bronze. Still utterly safe, still fully covered, yet undeniably bold. She crossed the room, water dripping in her wake, and stopped between my husband and me, close enough that I caught the clover scent of her shampoo beneath the storm. A single raindrop slid from her hair and landed on my thigh, searing cool against heat. She traced its path with her fingertip, featherlight, then lifted that same finger to her lips as though tasting my secret. The friend inhaled sharply. My husband's heartbeat thundered beneath the hush. "You feel it too," Zoe whispered, not asking. Her words cinched around us like silk cords, soft, inescapable. She extended both hands, one toward me, one toward my husband, offering not judgment but invitation. The fireplace spat sparks that spiraled upward, tiny galaxies suspended in amber air. None of us spoke. Our pulses answered for us, drumming a unanimous yes too loud to deny. Yet no one moved, caught between the storm outside and the storm inside, between terror of what we might unleash and the hunger to finally let it devour us. In that breathless equilibrium, lightning flashed, illuminating every drop clinging to Zoe's lashes, every tremor in my husband's stance, every unspoken vow threading through the friend's clenched jaw. Thunder followed, shaking the walls and our resolve. We stood locked together, 4 points of a compass no longer pointing home, waiting for whichever heart would break first and spill the rest of us into the fire. Dawn seeped through the lake house windows in fragile ribbons of gray gold, painting the hardwood in quiet apology. The storm had blown itself out, leaving only the hush of dripping eaves and the low hum of the refrigerator. We gathered in the kitchen like survivors, Zoe perched on the counter nursing black coffee, my husband at the sink, rinsing last night's rain from an untouched glass, his best friend leaning against the doorway, arms folded, gaze fixed on the floorboards. I hovered by the stove, pretending the kettle's slow rise of steam required all my attention. No one spoke about the moment when lightning and longing had braided us together. We spoke instead of safe things: the ferry schedule, the smell of damp cedar, the silence of a lake holding its breath. Yet every pause between sentences pulsed with memories, a collarbone under a trembling palm, rainwater traced along a thigh, the suspended invitation Zoe had offered like a key we were all too afraid to turn. She broke the stalemate first. "I heard something in the night," she said softly, eyes on her mug. "Not thunder." My husband's shoulders tensed. The friend lifted his head, wary. Zoe's fingers slid into her hoodie pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, edges frayed from too much handling. She set it on the table unopened. "You left this in my car." A hush fell thicker than the storm's roar. The friend's face paled. He pushed off the doorway but didn't approach the box. "I was waiting for the right moment," he said, voice brittle. My pulse stumbled. A proposal, abandoned in the trunk alongside spare life jackets and forgotten groceries, now sat between us like unexploded ordnance. Zoe's eyes found mine, searching for resentment, maybe jealousy. Instead, she saw the same confusion sketched across my own heart. She nudged the box forward with one fingertip. "Maybe the right moment never arrives," she whispered. "Maybe we just decide." The kettle shrieked. I jerked the handle, scalding my wrist. Instantly my husband crossed the room, cool cloth in hand, cradling my arm with a tenderness that ached. The friend moved too, but halted mid-step, unsure whether to reach for me or the ring meant for someone else. Zoe watched us all, something like resolve sharpening behind her fatigue. Outside, the lake caught the first clean shard of sunrise, turning shattered silver. Inside, for breaths synced, uneven, uncertain, but drawn from the same fragile morning. We stood suspended again, not by desire this time, but by the question of how to live with its echo. Love, escape, ruin, they felt indistinguishable, yet impossibly close. No one opened the velvet box. Morning ripened into late afternoon before any of us dared reach for the velvet box. By then, the lake lay calm, a mirror of new possibility, and the air smelled of pine warmed by sunlight instead of smoke. Zoe turned the ring in her palm, one gleam, then another, before passing it back to the man who had once tucked it beneath a fairy schedule. She kissed his cheek, the briefest press, leaving neither promise nor apology, only a gentle goodbye that throbbed with what-ifs. He followed her to the doorway, eyes shining, then let the screen swing shut behind her like a sigh. I waited on the porch steps, my husband beside me, knees drawn to his chest. We watched Zoe step into the waiting boat, its small engine humming an elegy across the water. The friend lifted a hand in farewell. She answered with a soft wave and the faintest smile, already blurred by distance and sunlight. When the boat rounded the point, quiet settled around us, first awkward, then tender. He sat beside me, close but not touching. I almost lost the two people I love most because I couldn't name the fire, he said, voice raw. I traced a circle on the weathered plank between us, letting the grain catch my fingertip. Maybe the fire named us, I answered. We shared a crooked laugh, tired and real. The friend lingered in the doorway, looking smaller without the storm's electricity. My husband patted the step between us. Wordlessly, the friend joined, shoulders brushing ours. 3 silhouettes, 1 slow exhale. When this weekend began, I whispered, I thought forgiveness was something you earned after a mistake. Maybe it's something you give before. My husband's thumb found the pulse inside my wrist, steady, willing. The friend laid his hand over ours, and for a moment, the world felt held together by skin and trust alone. We stayed like that until the shadows stretched long, then rose and walked the path to the dock. No grand speeches, no vows rewritten, just wind threading our hair and the hush of water lapping cedar posts. On the last plank, my husband cupped my face, resting his lips on my forehead, a promise quieter than words. I pressed my palm to the friend's chest, feeling his heartbeat answer in gratitude, not demand. When we finally turned back toward the house, the evening light folded around us, gentle and unafraid. The fire we'd courted had burned itself into something softer, an ember we would keep, glowing, to warm the rooms of memory without setting them ablaze.